There are a long list of updates that were just released for multiple software programs, including Microsoft Windows, Remote Desktop, Zoom, and Apple iOS. Summaries of each product will be given. Thank you for listening and for your support. Please like, follow, and subscribe for more tips and information. Summary of Microsoft March 2025 Patch Tuesday. Overview. Microsoft's March 2025 Patch Tuesday addresses 57 vulnerabilities, including 6 zero-day vulnerabilities that are currently being exploited. These updates are crucial for maintaining the security of various Microsoft products, including Windows, Microsoft Office, Azure, and others. What is a zero-day vulnerability? A zero-day vulnerability is a security flaw that is actively exploited or publicly disclosed before an official patch is available. This means attackers can use these vulnerabilities to compromise systems before the software vendor has a chance to fix them. Key zero-day vulnerabilities. Windows Win32 kernel subsystem elevation of privilege vulnerability. Impact allows attackers to gain system privileges on a device by exploiting a race condition. Affected products. Older Windows versions like Windows 8.1 and Server 2012 R2, as well as newer versions like Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016. Windows NTFS information disclosure vulnerability. Impact. Attackers can read portions of heap memory by inserting a malicious USB drive, potentially stealing information. Affected products. Various Windows versions. Windows Fast FAT File System Driver Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. Impact combines integer overflow and heap-based buffer overflow defects, allowing remote code execution. Affected products. Windows systems using the Fast FAT File System Driver. Windows NTFS Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. Impact. Attackers can execute code or disclose memory contents by tricking users into mounting a malicious virtual hard disk. Affected products. Various Windows versions. Microsoft Management Console Security Feature Bypass Vulnerability. Impact requires user interaction, where attackers convince users to click a malicious link or open a malicious file, bypassing security restrictions. Affected products. Microsoft Management Console. Other important vulnerabilities. Windows Remote Desktop Services vulnerabilities. Impact allows attackers to execute arbitrary code by exploiting race conditions. Affected products. Systems with the Remote Desktop Gateway role. Windows Domain Name Service Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. Impact enables remote code execution. Affected products. Windows DNS Server. Windows Subsystem for Linux Kernel Remote Code Execution Vulnerability. Impact allows remote code execution. Affected products. Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL2. Recommendations. Apply updates. Users and organizations should apply the latest patches immediately to protect their systems from potential attacks. Monitor systems. Regularly check for unusual activity that might indicate an attempted exploit. Restrict access. Limit access to critical systems and services to trusted users only. Use security tools. Consider using additional security tools to monitor and protect against potential exploits. Conclusion. Given the number of actively exploited vulnerabilities, it is essential for system administrators to apply these patches as soon as possible. Keeping software up to date and implementing strong security measures can help protect systems from potential cyber threats. Tips for users. Always keep your operating system and applications updated. Use strong, unique passwords and enable two-factor authentication where possible. Regularly back up important data to mitigate the impact of potential breaches. Summary of recent Zoom security vulnerabilities. Overview. Recent security disclosures have revealed several high-severity vulnerabilities in Zoom's client software, potentially exposing millions of users to data breaches, privilege escalation, and unauthorized access. These vulnerabilities affect Zoom's desktop, mobile, and workplace applications. Critical vulnerabilities. Heap-based buffer overflow, CV 2025-27440. What it is, this flaw occurs when Zoom apps write more data to a memory buffer than it can hold, causing adjacent memory regions to be overwritten. Impact: attackers can inject malicious code into systems, potentially gaining administrator-level access. Buffer underflow, CV 2025-27439. What it is, this happens when operations read more data from a buffer than it contains, which can crash the application or expose sensitive memory contents. Impact: this can lead to denial of service, DOS, attacks, or data leakage. Use after free, CVE 2025-0151. What it is, this flaw occurs when Zoom apps reference a memory address after it has been freed. Impact: attackers can execute code, compromise encryption keys, or access user credentials. Incorrect behavior order in iOS workplace apps, CV 2025-0150. What it is, improper sequencing of security checks in iOS workplace apps. Impact: attackers can intercept authentication tokens or meeting metadata, exposing enterprise-level data. Insufficient data verification, CVE 2025-0149. What it is, this medium-severity flaw allows unprivileged users to send malformed network packets that bypass authenticity checks. Impact: this can trigger DOS conditions, highlighting weaknesses in Zoom's data validation protocols. Mitigations. Affected software. Zoom desktop clients for Windows, macOS, and Linux, versions before 5.15.5 and 6.2.0. Zoom mobile apps for Android and iOS, versions before 5.15.5. Zoom Meeting SDK and VDI clients, versions before May 14, 12. Patches. Zoom has released patches and advises all users to upgrade to Zoom Client 6.2.0 or later. Recommendations. Update software. Prioritize updates for Zoom Workplace, Meeting SDK, and VDI clients. Restrict traffic. Limit Zoom traffic to authenticated users only to reduce exposure to network-based attacks. Audit logs. Regularly check logs for unusual activity, such as unexpected privilege changes or repeated meeting crashes. Consider E2E. For high-risk environments, use third-party tools that enforce end-to-end encryption, E2E, which Zoom lacks natively. Conclusion. These vulnerabilities highlight the fragility of widely used communication platforms like Zoom in the face of sophisticated cyber attacks. While Zoom has responded with patches, the recurrence of such flaws suggests deeper architectural issues. Organizations must treat Zoom as a high-risk vector and implement stringent controls to manage vulnerabilities effectively. Tips. Always keep your software up to date to protect against known vulnerabilities. Use strong, unique passwords for your Zoom accounts and enable two-factor authentication. Be cautious about sharing meeting links and use waiting rooms to control who joins your meetings. Summary of critical Windows Remote Desktop Services vulnerability. Overview. Microsoft's March security update addresses 57 vulnerabilities, including 6 critical ones. 2 of these critical vulnerabilities, CVE 2025-24035 and CVE 2025-24045, are in Windows Remote Desktop Services, RDS. These vulnerabilities allow attackers to execute malicious code remotely, posing a significant risk to system security. Key vulnerabilities. CVE 2025-24035, sensitive data storage in improperly locked memory. What it is: this vulnerability occurs when sensitive data is stored in memory that isn't properly secured. Impact: attackers can exploit this flaw to execute malicious code remotely, potentially compromising the entire system. CVE 2025-24045 race condition. What it is: this is a more complex vulnerability that requires an attacker to win a race condition, which is a situation where the timing of events affects the outcome. Impact: successful exploitation allows attackers to execute code remotely, leading to system compromise. Additional critical vulnerabilities. CVE 2025-26645, a remote code execution vulnerability in the remote desktop client, allowing attackers to execute code via relative path traversal. CVE 2025-24057, a heap-based buffer overflow in Microsoft Office, enabling remote code execution. CVE 2025-24064, a use-after-free flaw in Windows DNS Server, allowing remote code execution. CVE 2025-24084, a remote code execution vulnerability in the Windows subsystem for Linux kernel. Mitigations. Patches. Microsoft has released patches for these vulnerabilities. Users and organizations should apply these updates immediately to mitigate risks. Affected software. The vulnerabilities affect multiple versions of Windows Server and desktop systems. Recommendations. Update software. Ensure all systems are updated with the latest patches from Microsoft. Monitor systems. Regularly check for unusual activity that might indicate an attempted exploit. Restrict access. Limit access to remote desktop services to trusted users only. Use security tools. Consider using additional security tools to monitor and protect against potential exploits. Conclusion. These vulnerabilities highlight the importance of keeping software up to date and implementing strong security measures. By applying the latest patches and following best practices, users can protect their systems from potential attacks. Tips. Always keep your operating system and applications updated. Use strong, unique passwords and enable two-factor authentication where possible. Regularly back up important data to mitigate the impact of potential breaches. Summary of Apple WebKit Zero-Day vulnerability. Overview. Apple has released emergency security updates to address a critical zero-day vulnerability in its WebKit browser engine, identified as CVE 2025-24201. This vulnerability has been actively exploited in targeted attacks. What is the vulnerability? Type: out-of-bounds write issue. Impact: this flaw allows attackers to craft malicious web content that can break out of the web content sandbox, leading to unauthorized actions on affected devices. Essentially, it means that the malicious content can escape the restrictions normally placed on web content, potentially giving attackers control over the device. Affected Apple products. iOS 1.8.3.2 and iPadOS 1.8.3.2 affects iPhone XS and later models, various iPad Pro models, iPad Air, 3rd generation and later, iPad, 7th generation and later, and iPad mini, 5th generation and later. macOS Sequoia 1.5.3.2, applicable to Macs running macOS Sequoia. Safari 1.8.3.1, available for macOS Ventura and macOS Sonoma. visionOS 2.3.2, for Apple Vision Pro. tvOS 1.8.3.1, released specifically for Apple TV 4K, 3rd generation, though this update has no published CVE entries. Details and impact. Apple's security advisory noted that this vulnerability, may have been exploited in an extremely sophisticated attack against specific targeted individuals on versions of iOS before iOS 17.2. This suggests that the attacks were highly targeted and likely aimed at high-profile individuals or entities. The vulnerability allows attackers to perform unauthorized actions on the affected devices, which could include accessing sensitive data, installing malicious software, or taking control of the device. Previous vulnerabilities. This latest patch is Apple's third response to actively exploited zero-day vulnerabilities this year, following earlier patches for CVE 2025-24085 in January, CVE 2025-24200 in February. Mitigation and recommendations. Patches. Apple has released patches to address this vulnerability. Users are strongly advised to update their devices immediately to mitigate potential risks. Improved checks. The vulnerability was addressed with improved checks to prevent unauthorized actions. Tips for users. Update devices. Ensure all Apple devices are updated to the latest software versions to protect against this and other vulnerabilities. Be cautious online. Avoid clicking on suspicious links or downloading content from untrusted sources. Use security features. Enable security features such as two-factor authentication and strong passwords to add an extra layer of protection. By staying informed and taking proactive steps, users can better protect their devices and personal information from potential cyber threats. Please like, follow, and subscribe for more tips and information.